Wendy Brooks worked for the FedEx Supply Chain in Edwardsville, Illinois. She says she was harassed, humiliated, and left wondering how something like this could happen inside a company as large and respected as FedEx. Then she decided to speak up, and that's when things got interesting. Because once she reported the harassment, everything changed. Today, we are talking about Brooks v. FedEx, a case that shows how workplace harassment can go on for years and how the company's response can make things even worse. So by the end of this video, you'll understand how a harassment case really plays out behind the scenes. What HR did, what the court decided, and the single mistake that changed everything for Wendy Brooks. Whether you're an employee or an HR professional, this story will make you rethink what zero tolerance really means. Hi, I'm Harlow Reed, employment lawyer, HR consultant, and creator of the HR Insider, and on this channel, I do more than share legal opinions. I break down real cases to show how the law might apply to your workplace, whether you're an employee trying to protect your rights or an employer trying to do things the right way. On this channel, I review a lot of workplace harassment cases, but there's something about this story that feels especially heavy. Wendy Brooks, she was an employee who did what we always tell employees to do, to speak up, document, and file a report, yet somehow things only got worse. That shouldn't happen. No one should have to choose between their dignity and their paycheck. What stands out to me most is how predictable this pattern is. First comes the harassment, then the disbelief, then the isolation, and finally the retaliation. It's a sequence I've seen play out too many times in real workplaces, and it's exhausting to see it happen again and again. When I look at cases like this, I can't help but think about how different things could be if HR and leadership responded with empathy instead of defensiveness, if we truly listened instead of protecting the brand first. Because when companies silence one person, they send a message to everyone else: keep quiet if you want to keep your job. And that's why cases like this matter. They remind us that behind every legal filing, every courtroom, every trial is a person who was simply trying to be treated with respect. And that's not too much to ask. Okay, let's talk about it. The content shared on this channel is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional legal advice. Always consult with a qualified attorney or HR professional for specific guidance tailored to your needs. And hey, don't forget to like and subscribe. Wendy Brooks was hired at Edwardsville, Illinois FedEx Supply Chain facility on June 23, 2013 as a sanitation worker, and she spent her shifts keeping the warehouse safe and clean, sweeping, clearing, packing debris, and maintaining the sanitation standards that would keep operations moving. She earned $16.49 an hour. FedEx Supply Chain is part of the broader FedEx Corporation, one of the world's largest logistics and transportation companies. Headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee, FedEx operates a global network that delivers millions of packages every day. Its supply chain division, where Wendy Brooks worked, manages warehouse operations, order fulfillment, and logistics services for corporate clients. These facilities, like the one in Edwardsville, Illinois, are massive. They employ hundreds of hourly workers across sanitation, shipping, receiving, and operations, and these positions keep the distribution process running smoothly. When Wendy Brooks joined FedEx Supply Chain back in 2013, she was proud to have a stable job with a major company. She worked hard, she kept her head down, and earned respect from her coworkers. Now, her job wasn't glamorous. She worked in sanitation, keeping the massive Edwardsville warehouse clean and safe, but she took pride in doing it well. And for more than 2 years, everything was normal. Theodore Singleton worked alongside Wendy at FedEx Supply Chain facility in Edwardsville, Illinois. His job title was lead hourly teammate, essentially a senior floor worker who acted as a bridge between management and hourly employees. He wasn't officially a supervisor under company policy. He couldn't hire, fire, or promote anyone. But as a lead, he carried weight. He set the tone for others on the floor, communicated instructions from management, and often helped oversee day to day workflow in the warehouse. Leads like Singleton are often seen as the go to person. They know the processes, they've earned seniority, and they have informal authority, even if they don't have an official title. And for someone like Wendy, who worked in sanitation, that made him part colleague and part leader, someone you naturally wanted to stay on good terms with. For more than 2 years, everything was professional. But in January 2016, things changed. That's when Wendy says Theodore Singleton began crossing the line with comments, gestures, and physical contact that went from inappropriate to humiliating. What started out as offhand remarks would soon escalate into something much more serious. The first incidents began in January 2016. Wendy says that's when Theodore Singleton started making remarks whenever she bent down, clean, or mopped the warehouse floors. He'd walk by and say things like, "Oh, don't be bending over like that." It might sound like a single offhand comment, but according to Wendy, it wasn't. She says it happened twice a week for more than a year. Each time she tried to shrug it off, often replying, "Get a life," and then going back to work. But as the months went on, the behavior, it escalated. In December 2016, Wendy says she was walking out of a doorway as Singleton was coming in. And instead of stepping aside, he pressed his body against hers as he squeezed by. Wendy says his body made full contact with her chest. Wendy turned and asked, "Is that really necessary?" But Singleton laughed and kept walking. Then in February 2017, while she was filling a mop bucket, Singleton walked past her again. This time, slapping her on the butt. Wendy reacted immediately. She slapped him on the chest and told him, "Never touch me again." But still, it didn't stop. In April 2017, Singleton allegedly pointed at Wendy and thrust his pelvis toward her as she drove by in a golf cart. Two coworkers witnessed the gesture, and one of them even reported it to management. But management's response was to move Wendy to a different area in May 2017, away from Singleton. And for a while, it was a sigh of relief for Wendy. She thought it was over. But 2 months later, in July 2017, she was reassigned back to her original work area right where Singleton worked. And that's when the final incident happened. Wendy was showing a new male coworker around the facility when Singleton walked up and said, "Are you going to find a place to fork him?" Both Wendy and her coworker were stunned, and they reported it to management immediately. That was the last straw. The line had been crossed too many times. And Wendy knew she had to take her complaint further. She reported it. And what followed was an internal investigation by FedEx. But during the investigation, Singleton gave a very different account. He said that he and Wendy were friends, that they sometimes hugged at work, and nothing inappropriate ever happened. He even claimed that she once sent him a nude photo, which she firmly denied. Singleton insisted that he never made sexual remarks, never pressed his body against hers, and never slapped her. He admitted seeing her drive by on a golf cart once and said he lifted his pant leg to mimic how she was sitting, but he flat out denied thrusting his pelvis toward her. He also told investigators that one of the coworkers who reported the harassment was his ex-fiancée, calling her a jealous person. Despite the seriousness of the allegations, the investigation didn't result in the kind of accountability Wendy expected. And that sent a message that the company's priority was workflow, not employee safety. Not long after the investigation, Wendy says her treatment at work changed. Her hours, relationships, and sense of belonging shifted. She felt targeted and unwelcome, and then ultimately, her employment was terminated. From Wendy's perspective, this wasn't a coincidence. It was retaliation, punishment for speaking up about harassment. Even after the alleged harassment ended in July 2017 and legal proceedings were underway, Wendy continued working for FedEx for a time. In September 2019, she was promoted to lift truck operator, a recognition that she was skilled, reliable, and capable. Her new wage was $17.25 an hour, but by then, the scars from what had happened earlier in her career hadn't faded. Her experience had already raised serious questions about the company and how it handled harassment and retaliation. FedEx claimed her termination was for unrelated performance reasons. Wendy disagreed. She felt that when she spoke up, the company pushed her out. After she was terminated, Wendy Brooks decided she wasn't going to let what happened go unanswered. She filed complaints with both the Illinois Department of Human Rights and the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, claiming that she had been sexually harassed and then retaliated against for reporting it. After reviewing her case, the EEOC issued a right to sue letter on August 13th, 2018. Just a few months later, in November 2018, Wendy filed a formal lawsuit. Her lawsuit named FedEx Supply Chain as the primary defendant and also included claims against Theodore Singleton. Wendy's lawsuit included 7 allegations against FedEx Supply Chain under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. She alleged a hostile work environment at FedEx due to the sexual harassment, retaliation for reporting harassment, gender discrimination, retaliation for reporting discrimination, and against Theodore Singleton individually, she alleged hostile work environment under the Illinois Human Rights Act, retaliation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She sought back pay, compensatory damages, and punitive damages. She also asked for attorney fees and, above all, justice. This case is a great example of why it's so important to know your state's laws. For Wendy, that meant understanding Illinois law. In Illinois, it has some of the strictest harassment prevention requirements in the country. If you want to learn more, I've included free links below to harassment training for employees. But for now, let's continue our discussion about the claims that Wendy made against FedEx in court. FedEx Supply Chain denied wrongdoing. In January 2019, the company filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that Wendy's complaint failed to meet the technical pleading standards required under Title VII. They contended that Singleton wasn't a supervisor in the legal sense. He had no authority to hire, to fire, or to discipline, and that once management learned of the allegations, management acted promptly by separating the 2 employees. FedEx also argued there was no evidence of retaliation, portraying Wendy's termination as unrelated to her harassment report. In April 2019, the court issued its ruling. It denied the motion to dismiss in part, allowing Wendy's sexual harassment and retaliation claims to proceed, recognizing that if her allegations were true, the conduct described could create a hostile environment under federal law. The judge dismissed her gender discrimination counts but left the heart of the case intact. From there, discovery and summary judgment motions focused on 2 questions. Did FedEx take reasonable corrective action once it learned about the harassment? And was Wendy's termination actually retaliation for her complaints? And those 2 questions came down to one critical issue and one mistake that changed everything for Wendy Brooks. It wasn't a mistake in how she spoke up. It wasn't that she failed to document or file a complaint. She did all of that. The mistake was a legal one, a misunderstanding about how the law defines who counts as a supervisor under Title VII. Wendy believed that because Theodore Singleton was a lead teammate who gave directions and oversaw workflow, he was a supervisor. But under federal law, a supervisor isn't defined by influence or seniority. It's defined by authority. To qualify as a supervisor under Title VII, a person must have the power to hire, fire, to discipline, or make tangible employment decisions. Singleton didn't have that authority, and the court saw him as a coworker, not a supervisor. That single distinction changed the entire outcome of the case. It meant FedEx could only be held liable if it failed to take prompt and effective corrective action once it knew about the harassment. After reviewing the evidence, the court decided that reassignment counted as a reasonable response from her employer, and then Wendy's case, it collapsed. Because in the eyes of the law, the company had done just enough, and that was enough to avoid liability. And as for the retaliation claim, the court determined that there wasn't enough evidence to link Wendy's termination directly to her complaint. If you really want to understand what was happening in this case and what employers and supervisors are legally required to do, I recommend watching my harassment prevention training video for supervisors. It breaks down what Title VII expects from employers, how investigations should be handled, and why supervisors are held to a higher standard of conduct when it comes to preventing and responding to harassment. And if you've been following my retaliation series, my second retaliation workbook goes even deeper. It explains how a supervisor is defined under Title VII and why that definition matters in cases like this one. I've included a link in the video description along with my harassment quizzes and training resources. Taken together, the videos, the quizzes, and the workbooks, these resources will give you a better understanding of how harassment laws work, what protections exist, and what every supervisor and employee needs to know. Cases like this one are never easy to hear. Companies love to say they have a zero tolerance policy for harassment, but zero tolerance only works if it's enforced. And if supervisors truly understand what that means in practice, policies don't stop harassment, people do. A real zero tolerance culture requires training, accountability, and follow through, not just words on paper. One thing I didn't mention earlier is that the Illinois Department of Human Rights conducted its own investigation, and it went far deeper than FedEx's internal review of Wendy's complaint. Wendy even attached that report to her lawsuit. And the difference between the two is striking. FedEx focused on workflow, but the state focused on the law. If you want to understand what a proper workplace investigation should look like, check out my investigation playlist. I walk through the steps every employee and HR professional should expect. For Wendy, the lesson was painful. She did everything right, yet the system failed her. Keep learning from real cases like this one. I'm Harlow Reed, and this is the HR Insider. Thanks for watching today. I'll see you in the next video.